Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Valen, and this is Create v.3e. Today I'm going to be taking you through everything power related, how you can make the wonderful things that will power all of your mechanical creations, plus some advanced tools that may help you in all manner of different ways. Let's talk about power. Power, so far I've been limiting to the use of creative engines as well as the hand crank. Instead, we're going to be talking about some of the entry level to the more advanced stuff that you could possibly use. The current entry level one in my mind is going to be this, the water wheel. It is made with pretty much a whole bunch of wood, and an andesite alloy. It's very simple, and you can stack multiples together next to each other. You just have to have some kind of water source running against the water wheel. You do not want the water running the opposite direction, and it will give you a lot more power. The maximum you can get out of it is 256 stress units and 16 rotations per minute. And with that, you should be able to get a pretty good start on a lot of things. In fact, you'll be able to power this quite well, and it should go at a pretty decent speed, even with only one. But you can always, as I said, stack them next to each other, add a little bit more water, encase them, and so on. Yes, you can use bubble columns along the back if you want to really make it a full enclosed water grid, but it's not going to give you any more water power than you would with just a simple setup. In fact, I don't even need to have the water go this far, and I would still get 256 stress units and 16 RPMs. Moving on from that, we have probably what used to be the equivalent, easiest, and cheapest way of doing it besides that was, in previous versions, the Encased Fan. The Encased Fan requires a propeller, which is actually iron sheets, so you would have had a mechanical press in order to make these, but they were extremely compact, using either a campfire, a bit of lava, or magma block below it, and it would actually produce 4 RPM. It would produce more than this, but now it currently only produces 4 RPMs and 64 stress units, which is, as you see, rather insufficient for a lot of things. It doesn't give you a lot, but it does give you something. It's a lot more useful for things like blowing wind and sucking up items. So you're going to want to keep that in mind, as it's a lot more useful as a tool than it is as a source of power. Just know that it also requires a redstone signal in order for it to actually function as a source of power. Otherwise, you just need to have something plugged into its backside so that it can actually be forced to do stuff. As you can see here, I'm just using a hand crank to demonstrate one or the other, and you can see that there are some wind particles being blown out, and when I do the reverse, the wind particles come back in. Now, probably the best option that a lot of people will have early on isn't actually going to be the water wheel. While it is very immersive and pretty, and that's what this mod is mostly about, the windmill is extremely strong, just not very fast. So, a windmill wind bearing is what you're going to be wanting to make. A bit of stone, a shaft, a turntable, which is just a wood and another shaft, and you've got yourself a whole lot of stress units. I've placed one here, as you see above, like so, and I just put a piece of wool on there. There are a few things that it can accept by default that it will use as wind sails, and that is sail frames, white sails, or different colored sails. In this case, this is a white sail that has been colored with pink, white, or blue, or you can use just the blank ones. The sail frames themselves just require some sticks and andesite alloy. You can combine those with a piece of wool, and you can get 8 of them out of one. The difference in performance between the sail frames and the white sails is 0, except aesthetically. It just looks different. It's solid. You can walk across it. These ones here, you can actually fall through the center if you're careful enough to try and do so. But in order to activate one of these, once you have attached one of these items onto it, in this case, let's grab this sail frame, place it on top, and right-click. And you can see it's working. It's not exactly the intended behavior, but at least you get the idea. If I wanted to, I could take this and actually jump up, put it on like so. It looks like it's hovering, but it still works. It connects properly. And this is how these will function. If you use wool, they will not connect without slime or some kind of superglue. Superglue is made from some kind of slime, iron sheets, and iron nuggets. And this will allow you, when held in the offhand, to actually glue lots of blocks together. I'll demonstrate that further in a moment. So, a windmill bearing. if you look at it, I click on it, just one block of wool or sail frame or white sail will create 512 stress units. That's a lot considered to the 256 from this, and it's a lot more compact. Well, what happens if I do 2 wool? Well, it will not actually increase whatsoever. If you look here, it will only do 1 rotation per minute though, so you will have to step that up in methods that I discussed earlier, using your different cogs and such, or, now that you have access to brass, a rotation speed controller. In order to start or stop one of these, just right-click it, and it will begin or end. You obviously can have different ways of changing things about by just rotating them with the wrench, or you can change it if it's clockwise or counterclockwise as you desire. Just empty hand, and you can have it rotate. Now, if I connect both of these together to the same unit, and I have them both performing, it will double. That's right, you can actually stack these in lots of little factories if you want, but just be aware that if I show you hitboxes of items, I currently have 2 entities being created, as opposed to one large one that could produce quite a bit. Now, if you are one that will actually produce a whole lot of these little windmill bearing factories, just using 1 block for minimum impact, well, it's actually just going to eventually, potentially, lag you out if you end up over spamming these things. So just know that they're better for aesthetics, and there are much better solutions than this. Now let's talk about actually making this a little bit more interesting. As with cogs, you can use the little preview that there is for attaching items to these. Now, if I were to take some wool and attach this wool to the side here, it's not actually going to spin this wool because I would need to use super glue or some kind of adhesive. In this case, let me actually break this. If I hold the super glue in my offhand, I can then stick it in place. Alternately, I could just hold the super glue and choose a facing to adhere things to that, like so. And then it will allow those items to all spin appropriately. Now, if I hold on to the super glue, anything that is kind of hidden by it, you can therefore start seeing where things are stuck together, if that facing is visible. To clear a piece of super glue, simply just left click and you can break it away and it'll be gone. Now in this case, I have quite a stretch of the sail frames attached. And by doing this, I'm still producing 512 stress units. Nothing really fantastic there. If I were to take this and super glue the bottom, it will squish in place, therefore allowing it to be placed. I need to add a little bit of super glue here so that it can actually attach to the rest of the sail frame. And I have a seat. What are seats useful for? Well, they are made so that you can actually attach to moving entities like this. In this case, this entire thing is now solid. In previous versions, this would not be the case. It would actually be a bit more transparent and see-through, and you would fall through it. But now, if you don't end up clicking on the right spot, there we go, you would have just fallen through these in some cases. Now, there is a little bit of some collision issues. As you can see here, we're passing through some things, but it's actually not going to destroy anything unless I stop it in that location. There are different settings that you have on these that you can adjust with the wrench to allow you to, well, mine things with it in a way if you so desire. But otherwise, just know that it's more aesthetic than anything. And these seats are just a wooden slab with some kind of wool. They're highly colorable and can be used for multiple decorations. But they will also allow you a measure of safety on any of your mobile, well, contraptions. In this case, I'm going to try and get all the way back here without falling and dying. Click this and end its spinning rotation. But if you notice, we're at 1024 instead of 512. Why is that? Reason being is that the entire length of this is actually 16 blocks, which is 8 more than its default setup. So if you have 8 blocks in here, then it's going to do 512, or up to 8 blocks. If you have more than that by another 8, say 16 in this case, then it will actually create them. But it has to be wind-producing items like wool, sail frames, or the white sail frames that may or may not have been colored. Using something else like this white seat or some other items like stones or whatnot that may have been glued in place, those will not produce any kind of potential stress power. Something I have yet to cover about the windmills, if you don't want or have the access to slime or have not produced far enough yet to actually make your own slime, There are ways of taking shortcuts with this. With a windmill bearing not requiring one and having a sticky surface, you can make a radial chassis. This just requires a little bit of wood and some andesite alloy as well. Put that on the side, and normally you would need to have some kind of sticky surface on the sides here, applying super glue or slime, etc. But in this case, we're actually going to take a little bit of these sail frames and attach them to the sides. Like so, and so. Then I can do the same over here and here. Just by right-clicking in the middle, it will actually keep these two items spinning. So if you're having problems finding any kind of slime, making slime, or even finding wool, you can just get away with a little bit of wood, some metal, and some ingenuity. Now we've covered quite a bit of power, but we haven't covered the most unique and inventive one yet. And this is going to be a really tiny example of what there is. I plan to go a lot more in depth in future videos with this one. But primarily, a cart assembler made with just some wood, some andesite alloy, and a piece of redstone, when placed on top of a bit of rail, can be really important. Now in this case, I have a deployer as well that requires electron tubes, andesite casing, cogwheel, and a brass hand that requires some brass sheets. Combine these together with a minecart and a bit of rail, and you've got yourself a really interesting contraption. There are also controller rails, which allow you to power rails in only one direction, therefore encouraging items to, well, only go in one direction. It's really powerful. But once you place a cart assembler onto a piece of rail, you can then add a contraption on top. In this case, let's put down this deployer. It is currently going to deploy things that it has available either in its filter or being fed to it, etc. In this case, I'm just going to make it punch. Just by right-clicking with the wrench, it therefore goes into an offensive mode. So when powered, it will therefore start punching. As this is a cart assembler, I don't have any kind of little power items except for the speed of the minecart itself. So if I actually turn this on, having a redstone signal to the cart assembler, it will actually pick up any kind of contraptions attached to the top. There we go. And it will start punching things in a radius. Talk about a little bit of defense for your area. Something to worry about. But then once you disable that, you turn off the power to the cart assembler, any contraptions will then be replaced back on the cart assembler itself, allowing you to edit them, change things, and so on. Now let's talk about extremely high power, and that is going to come in the form of furnace engines, as well as flywheels that are attached to either a furnace or a blast furnace. Now it all depends on how you want to go about using these and when, because they do have certain requirements. They are not a passive ability like most of the others have been, where a water wheel is constantly running, windmill constantly running, the encased fan constantly running. These need to be powered by specifically fuel. And in this case, it's basically some kind of burnable. And I don't just mean coal, you actually have to be using some kind of burnable in here. It can be coal, it can be a bucket of lava, whatever, but it has to actively be actually smelting in order for these to take effect. So a furnace engine needs to be placed on the side of a furnace. It will then automatically attach, and it can be a blast furnace as well, and a flywheel. Now you try right-clicking on the side here, and it'll look a little bit like this, but it's actually not complete. It does not function in this way. You want it to be two spaces. 1, 2, then place here. And you'll start seeing the cables connect properly. That is how it's supposed to function. Now, with these in mind, let's actually discuss the differences between the blast furnace and the furnace. So like I said, you need to have something that actually will be fueling. In this case, let's grab some iron. I'm going to put a stack of iron in here, and a stack of iron in here. It doesn't have to be iron, it can be wood, it can be whatever. It just needs to be actively heating in the furnaces. Now remember, the furnace will burn twice as long as the blast furnace, so that might actually be to your advantage, because the power that you get from these is tremendous. A furnace will give you 16 RPMs to start, which is the same as a water wheel setup, as well as 16,384, whereas a water wheel will give you 256. That's quite the change. Now if I go up to a blast furnace, the RPMs stay about the same, but they double because it's going twice as fast, so that makes sense. Then you go into the network stress here, and it's 32,768, which is double that of the furnace. Of course, it's going to run out of the smelting process twice as fast, but it is going to give you a tremendous amount of stress to add into your stress network, if you so desire, so that you can power some really heavy-duty, chunky machines. Now, in order to make these, you're probably going to need mechanical crafters. I have a flywheel over here, and I've got the engine over here. Remember, I am currently have a crafter slot cover in the middle. You don't have to have those. You can break the center out if you so desire, but just know that you just need to have something processing these, and then they all get made and can go into the chest. There we are. Simple as that. And even though a furnace engine is a 3x3 recipe, you cannot craft it on a regular crafting grid. You still have to use a mechanical crafter in order to make that. Mechanical crafter, once made, can actually, well, make you some really, really large items. Let's combine this together, and you can see that this will actually start making this huge item and export things into a nearby inventory. You can always adjust these by just changing how they directionally add things. Currently, everything is going to go to the right in this case, and you can just right-click on here to change the direction that these items go. If they're all connected and have an output, in this case an adjustable crate is the output for this, you'll get your results over here. It just needs some kind of mechanical power. These mechanical crafters are made with brass casings, electron tubes, cogwheels, and crafting tables. You'll need several of them, and there are a little bit more that I'll be covering about this in the future. But just know that this is something, once you've been able to make brass, is priceless. And as we have access to both electron tubes and brass, we now bring you to some of the more unique and interesting things, like mechanical arms. These are made with, as I just said, brass sheets, electron tubes, and a little bit of casing and alloys. So, how do these work? By right-clicking, you therefore select an input from where it will take an item. Then you can double-click to select an output. Yes, you can select multiple inputs, and you can select multiple outputs. In order to clear them, you just left-click while holding on to it, and it will clear it away. Now, it will not take from inside of inventories, but it can place on things. The depot is an excellent example of how these can be used to currently just pick up and place items. Depots can be fed by belts, hoppers, and other unique items like that. If you want to see where these things currently are inputting and outputting to, just hold a wrench and it will tell you the different items. Obviously, like most of the items in this mod, you have different options available to you for what you'd like to adjust, how it reacts to the world, and is configurable just by applying these different things, scrolling on the scroll wheel, and so on. That aside, let's take a look at the Extendo Grip. This is a very unique item. You can use it to, well, punch things with a bit of a knockback, or you can use it in your offhand with any other kinds of tools or weapons as you desire, and actually get a several block reach extension. You can now see that the bounding box is reaching quite a distance over there, and I can break that grass in a good reach. On top of that, I can also punch entities if I so desired, or just grab things from a good distance. Oh, if I'm fast enough, but it appears these guys are a little faster than I am. There we go, I got it. Normally, if I were to put this in my offhand, I cannot reach these, and even the closest ones are still much further than my reach allows. Mentioned at least once was the rotation speed controller. This thing is really powerful and one of my favorite devices in the entire mod. This here is made with an integrated circuit. These are expensive little buggers that you'll have to make on a mechanical crafter, which will require a lapis sheet, which also requires some redstone, polished, etc. But you'll need to take a block of lapis and smash it into a sheet, and then you'll get one of these things. Now, what does it do? When you place it down and it's hooked into something rather slow, if you notice on the front side here, this is rotating at a very slow speed. It's going at 2 RPMs from this windmill. Now I have it connected and coming out this other side by adding in a large cogwheel, and it is going at a much faster rate on the other side. In fact, 80. So that's a lot faster, but it will increase the stress on the network once it's attached to something. So you'll have to keep that in mind. With this in place, you can therefore speed up contraptions considerably. I have before me a way that you can actually increase the amount of ores. Last but not least, we've got the Cuckoo Clock. Cuckoo Clock is made with just a little bit of wood, cogwheel, and a clock. Place it down, have it powered with some kind of, well, in this case, creative motor, but anything that has at least 1 RPM should do just fine, whether because it only uses up a tiniest bit of stress in your network, but it will allow you to find out certain things. Right now, it's not quite sunset, but the moment that you can sleep, it therefore tells you that it is time that you can jump in your bed. But it will have a little creeper pop out and let you know you can take a snooze. Now, if you want, you can also turn it to noon, is the other time that it will actually do this, and it won't use a creeper anymore. It'll use a little pig. So it's just a little nice to have thing. Otherwise, it will just tell you the time of day as it progresses throughout. So I hope you've enjoyed this bit by bit on Create, as I've tried to cover just about everything that I could possibly do in this catch 'em up video. I'm going to be doing some more videos with lots of little contraption ideas that you guys can always adopt, improve, and customize to your own desire. If you enjoyed, please be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, and as always, be sure to stop by on Twitch, come visit us, click that notification bell, and help us spread the mischief. Till next time, I'll see ya. Bye.